The blue-green world of Zephyros Prime hung in space like a perfect jewel. Its 3 moons cast gentle light across rolling meadows and crystal-clear lakes. For 2,000 years, the Zephyrian people had lived in peace on this world, and 11 others like it. They built cities that looked like gardens, with towers that spiraled up toward the sky like living trees. Their ships moved between stars carrying art, music, and knowledge to trade with other peaceful species. But today, Admiral Cathara stood in the command center of the orbital defense station, watching death approach her world. The Vorthan Empire had come at last. Their massive black ships moved through space like hungry beetles, blotting out stars as they passed. Cathara had heard the stories from other worlds that fell to the Vorthans. They took everything. The young and strong became slaves. The old and weak simply disappeared. The planets themselves were stripped bare of anything useful. "How many ships?" Cathara asked her sensor officer. Her voice stayed calm, though her 4-chambered heart beat fast with fear. 300 confirmed, Admiral, maybe more behind them. The young officer's pale blue skin had turned almost white. "Our scouts report they destroyed the outer colonies without warning. No survivors." Cathara closed her large dark eyes for a moment. The Zephyrian defense fleet had only 40 ships designed for exploration and rescue work, not war. They had weapons, but they were meant for clearing space debris or defending against pirates. Against the Vorthan war machine, they would last perhaps an hour. "Send word to the other worlds," she ordered. "Tell them to prepare for evacuation. All civilian ships should begin moving people to the deep colonies." "Yes, Admiral." The communication officer's hand shook as he worked. "Should we contact our allies?" Cathara almost laughed, but there was no humor left in her. The peaceful alliance was made up of species like themselves, gentle beings who had never known real war. The Alterans with their songs that could heal broken minds. The crystal people of Luminous who grew their cities instead of building them. The floating gas dwellers of Nimbus who painted pictures with clouds. Beautiful, wise, peaceful people who would be just as helpless against the Vorthans as the Zephyrians. "Our allies cannot help us," she said quietly. "But send the distress call anyway. Send it on all frequencies in all languages we know. Maybe someone somewhere will hear us." The first Vorthon ships appeared at the edge of the system 6 hours later. Cathara watched them come, dark shapes moving with terrible purpose. The Zephyrian defense fleet moved to meet them, 40 small ships against an armada. The battle was worse than she had imagined. The Vorthans did not even slow down. Their massive guns tore through Zephyrian shields like they were made of paper. Beautiful ships that had explored a dozen star systems died in flashes of light. Within 20 minutes, only 12 Zephyrian vessels remained. "Admiral," her communications officer called out, his voice breaking. "Captain Velta sends his final message. He says he is proud to serve with you." Cathara watched as Captain Velthas drove his crippled ship into the side of a Vorthan destroyer. Both ships vanished in a ball of fire that lit up the darkness of space. "Pull back," she ordered. "All remaining ships retreat to the planet. We will make our stand in orbit." But she knew it was hopeless. The Vorthans had barely noticed their attack. The great black ships kept coming, spreading out to surround Zephyros Prime like a closing fist. As night fell on the capital city below, Cathara stood alone in her command center. Most of her crew had been evacuated to the planet's surface. Only the essential officers remained, preparing for the end. "Admiral," the communications officer said, "the emergency beacon is ready. Should we activate it?" The emergency beacon was the last hope of any dying civilization. It would broadcast their location and their plea for help across the galaxy. The signal would travel for hundreds of years, reaching every corner of known space. Maybe some future generation of explorers would find it and know that the Zephyrians had existed. "Yes," she said. "Send it. Tell the galaxy what happened here. Tell them about our people, our art, our dreams. Tell them about the Vorthans and their hunger for destruction." The young officer worked quickly, his fingers dancing over the controls. "The beacon is active, Admiral. Broadcasting on all frequencies in all known languages. The signal is strong. It will reach the furthest edges of explored space." Cathara nodded. At least their story would survive even if they did not. The Vorthan ships began their bombardment just before dawn. Great beams of energy lanced down from orbit, turning cities into craters. The defense stations around the planet died one by one, their lights going out like candles in a wind. Cathara felt her station shudder as enemy fire found its mark. The lights flickered and she heard the sound of atmosphere escaping through holes in the hull. "Emergency power only," she ordered. "Keep the beacon transmitting as long as possible." Through the viewports she could see her world burning. The great forest cities were gone. The crystal lakes had become pools of molten glass. Everything her people had built over 2,000 years was being destroyed in a single day. "Admiral," the communications officer said urgently, "I'm getting something strange on the deep space sensors." "What kind of strange?" Kethara asked, though she barely cared anymore. Nothing could help them now. The beacon, it's not just broadcasting anymore. Something is answering it. Kethara felt her heart skip a beat. "Answering? Are you certain?" "Yes, Admiral. The signal is coming from the quarantine zone, the region marked as uninhabitable in all our star charts. The quarantine zone. Every spacefaring species knew about it. A cluster of systems marked with warnings in every galactic database. The worlds there were classified as Deathworlds, places where no civilized being could survive. Some said they were cursed. Others claimed they were the testing grounds of an ancient, vanished race. All agreed that nothing good could come from that dark corner of space. "What does the signal say?" Kethara asked. The officer worked frantically to decode the message. It's a response to our distress call. Someone out there heard us. They're coming." "Coming? From the Deathworlds?" Kethara stared at the readings. "That's impossible. Nothing lives in the quarantine zone. The signal is getting stronger, Admiral. Multiple sources now, and they're moving fast. Very fast." Kethara looked out at her burning world, then at the dark space beyond where something was stirring in the quarantine zone. The Vorthans had brought death to her people, but what might be coming from the Deathworlds themselves? As her station's systems failed around her and the lights went out one by one, Admiral Kethara could only wait and wonder what her desperate cry for help had awakened in the darkness between the stars. The beacon kept transmitting, carrying their plea across the void, not knowing that it had already found ears that had been waiting for such a call. In the depths of space, ships were moving. Ships built by beings who had learned to survive in places where survival should have been impossible. The Deathworlders were coming. 3 days had passed since the Vorthan bombardment began. Admiral Kethara huddled in an underground bunker beneath the ruins of the capital city. Above them, the enemy ships continued their methodical destruction of everything the Zephyrians had built. The beautiful spire cities were gone. The floating gardens had crashed to earth. Even the great libraries carved into living mountains had been reduced to rubble. "Any word from the outer colonies?" Kethara asked her communications officer. The young Zephyrian looked exhausted, his blue skin pale from stress and lack of sleep. "Nothing from the inner systems, Admiral. The Vorthans cut off all communications, but—" He paused, checking his instruments again. "The deep space beacon is still receiving responses. More signals every hour? From the quarantine zone?" "Yes, Admiral. And they're getting closer." Kethara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold bunker air. The quarantine zone was forbidden for good reason. Every species in the galaxy agreed on that. The worlds there were poison. The gravity too strong, the radiation too intense, the weather too violent for any civilized being to survive. If something lived there, it was not something any sane person would want to meet. A low rumble shook the bunker. More bombing from above. But then Kethara heard something else. A different sound. Her communications officer was shouting, "Admiral, ships, massive energy signatures at the system's edge. Vorthon reinforcements?" Kethara felt her hope die a little more. "No, ma'am. These readings, I've never seen anything like them. The power output is off our scales." High above them, in orbit around the dying world, Vorthan Captain Jektar was having similar problems with his sensors. The massive alien stood 8 feet tall with thick gray skin and 4 powerful arms. His species had conquered 17 systems by being stronger, faster, and more brutal than anyone they met. But now his instruments were showing him something impossible. "What do you mean, unknown ships?" He growled at his sensor operator. "Sir, 12 vessels just dropped out of hyperspace at maximum sensor range. The energy readings suggest they're larger than our dreadnoughts, but the design is completely unknown. They're not in any of our databases." Jektar pulled up the readings on his command screen. The ships were massive, but they had an odd angular design. Where Vorthon vessels were built for intimidation, all smooth curves and predatory elegance, these newcomers looked like they were built for war. Real war. Ugly, brutal, no-nonsense war. Scavengers, probably, Jektar decided. "Come to pick over the remains when we're done." Send a warning transmission. Tell them to leave or be destroyed. The Vorthon communication went out across space, arrogant and threatening as usual. It reached the lead ship of the human fleet and was translated by advanced computers that had been listening to galactic chatter for decades. Admiral Marcus Rivera read the translation with interest. He was a tall, lean man with gray hair and scars from a dozen battles. He had been born on Europa, one of humanity's first colonies outside Earth's solar system. Like all humans, he came from a world that had tried to kill him every day of his life. They want us to leave, he told his bridge crew. Claim this system belongs to them now. Standard response, Admiral? Asked his tactical officer. Not yet, Lieutenant. Let's see what we're dealing with first. Communications. Try to contact the people who sent the distress signal. Use the translation protocols. If they're advanced enough for space travel, we should be able to talk to them. The signal that reached Cathara's bunker was unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever received. It was clearly artificial, clearly intelligent, but the language was completely foreign. The computer system struggled to find any common reference points. Then slowly, words began to form on the screen. The translation was rough but understandable. Greetings. We received your distress call. We are the Terran Defense Fleet. Are you in need of assistance? Cathara stared at the message. Terran? She had never heard of such a species. And they were offering help? To strangers? Send a reply, she ordered. Tell them we are grateful for any aid they can provide. Ask them their intentions. The response came quickly. We are here to help. Can you provide information about the attacking forces? For the next hour, Cathara found herself in the strangest conversation of her life. The beings calling themselves humans asked detailed questions about Vorthon tactics, weapons, and ship designs. They seemed particularly interested in how the Vorthons treated conquered populations. They enslaved the young and strong, Cathara transmitted. The others are killed or left to die. They strip the world's bare of resources. The reply took longer this time. When it came, there was something different about it. Something cold. Understood. Thank you for the information. Please remain in your shelters. We will handle this. In orbit, Captain Jektar was growing impatient. The unknown ships had been sitting at the edge of the system for hours, ignoring his warnings. It was time to teach these scavengers a lesson about Vorthon power. All ships battle formation, he ordered. We'll destroy 3 of them. That should send a clear message to the rest. The Vorthon fleet began to move, 200 massive warships turning toward the human fleet like a pack of predators. They were confident. They had conquered every enemy they had ever faced. Admiral Rivera watched them come and shook his head slowly. Looks like they want to do this the hard way. All ships, battle stations. Remember, these are the people who attack civilians. Show them what happens when they pick on someone who can fight back. The human ships began to change. What had looked like simple angular hulls suddenly bristled with weapons. Armor plating slid back to reveal missile tubes and energy cannons. Point defense systems emerged from hidden ports like the spines of an angry porcupine. Captain Jektar saw the transformation and felt his first moment of doubt. These ships were not designed like any military vessel he knew. They were ugly, practical, built by beings who expected to be shot at and wanted to survive it. Sir, his sensor operator said nervously, I'm reading multiple weapon systems on each ship, more than our dreadnoughts carry. Impossible. They only have 12 ships. Sir, I think every surface on those ships can be weaponized. The Vorthons opened fire first, as they always did. Massive energy beams lanced across space, enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. The humans did not try to dodge. Instead, their ships took the hits on their forward armor and kept coming. No shields? Jektar muttered. What kind of fool builds a warship without energy shields? He got his answer when the humans fired back. Every ship in their fleet opened up at once, filling space with missiles, particle beams, and projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed. The weapons were not elegant or energy efficient. They were simply devastating. The first Vorthon ship to die was a heavy cruiser. It took 7 direct hits in 3 seconds and simply came apart, its hull unable to handle that much concentrated damage. 2 more ships followed within minutes. In her bunker, Admiral Cathara watched the battle through military sensors that had somehow survived the bombardment. The readings made no sense. The human ships were outnumbered 20-1, but they were winning. How is this possible? She whispered. Her communications officer was pale with shock. Admiral, I'm analyzing the human ship designs. They're not built for comfort or efficiency. They're built to kill things and not die while doing it. Look at this. He highlighted sections of the sensor readings. Their armor is 3 times thicker than anything in our databases. Their weapons are designed for maximum damage, not minimum energy use. And their computers, they're not just targeting Vorthon ships. They're analyzing weak points and sharing the data across their entire fleet. What kind of people build ships like that? The kind that come from somewhere terrible, Admiral. The kind that had to learn to survive in places where everything wants to kill them. The battle raged for 6 hours. When it ended, 50 Vorthon ships had been destroyed and the rest were retreating in disorder. The humans had lost 0 ships, though several showed damage from the fighting. As the Vorthon fleet limped away, Admiral Rivera sent another message to the planet below. The immediate threat has been dealt with. Are there other Vorthon forces in the area? Cathara realized her hands were shaking as she typed her reply. They have fleets in 12 systems. Hundreds of ships. They will return with more forces. Good, came the reply. We'll be waiting for them. Cathara stared at the message. Good. What kind of beings hoped for more enemies to fight? The kind, she realized, that came from the quarantine zone. The kind that had learned to survive in hell itself. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they were nothing like the galaxy had ever seen. The Vorthon High Command meeting took place on the massive fortress ship Conquest Eternal, deep in the heart of their territory. Emperor Vrakthus himself attended, his 12-foot frame towering over the holographic display that showed the disaster at Zephyros Prime. Explain to me, the Emperor said in a voice like grinding stone, how 50 of our ships were destroyed by 12 unknown vessels. General Morthak, commander of the 3rd Conquest Fleet, shifted nervously. His species had ruled through superior firepower for 3 centuries. They had never met an enemy they could not simply overwhelm with numbers and brutality. Sire, the enemy ships were unlike anything in our databases. Their weapons were primitive but devastatingly effective. They showed no regard for energy efficiency or elegant design. They built their ships purely to inflict damage. Primitive weapons destroyed our cruisers? Not primitive in power, sire, primitive in philosophy. They use kinetic projectiles moving at impossible speeds. Chemical explosives that should not work in space vacuum, but somehow do. Energy weapons that waste enormous amounts of power but hit like falling moons. Emperor Vrakthus studied the sensor recordings of the battle. The enemy ships moved wrong. They did not dance around incoming fire like civilized vessels. They simply absorbed punishment and kept advancing, accepting damage that would disable any rational design. What species builds such ships? They call themselves humans, sire. From the Terran Defense Fleet, we have no records of either name. Then we will make records. Send the 1st and 2nd Conquest Fleets. 800 ships should be sufficient to deal with 12 primitive vessels, no matter how heavily armed. General Morthak hesitated. Sire, there is something else. Our spies report that more ships are arriving in the Zephyros system. The humans appear to be reinforcing their position. How many more ships? Unknown, sire. Our scouts do not return from that area of space. Admiral Rivera stood in the briefing room of the UES Indomitable, looking at the holographic display that showed the Zephyros system. Red dots indicated Vorthon fleet positions in nearby systems. Blue dots showed the positions of human and allied ships now arriving in response to his call for backup. Status report, he ordered. Commander Sarah Chen, his tactical officer, highlighted sections of the display. The Terran Defense Corps has sent the 5th and 7th battle groups. Admiral Okonkwo is bringing the Mars fleet from the inner colonies, and we've received confirmation that our allies are responding as well. The pack? The Cathara hunting fleet is 3 days out. 12 ships, but their crews are eager for a real fight. They've been complaining that pirate suppression missions are too easy. The Rock Eaters, the Grimlock Collective is sending a mining fleet. They're not technically military, but those asteroid crackers can punch holes in anything, and the Grimlocks love a good brawl. Rivera nodded with satisfaction. Humanity had not contacted the galactic community by accident. When Earth's deep space probes first detected alien signals, the decision was made to observe and learn before making contact. What they learned convinced them that most alien species were too peaceful for their own good. What about the locals? Rivera asked. Admiral Cathara has been very helpful. The Zephyrians have detailed intelligence on Vorthon tactics and ship designs. Apparently, this empire has been conquering peaceful species for centuries. always using the same basic strategy, which is overwhelming force applied without mercy. They arrive in massive numbers, demand surrender, and then proceed to enslave or exterminate the population whether they surrender or not. They've never encountered serious resistance. Rivera smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Then they're in for an education. What's the word from Earth? The Defense Council has classified the Vorthons as a Class A threat to galactic stability. We have full authorization to use whatever force is necessary to eliminate them as a threat to peaceful species. Outstanding. How long until the Vorthon reinforcements arrive? Our scouts report a massive fleet moving toward this system. 800 ships arriving in approximately 18 hours. Rivera studied the tactical display. By the time the Vorthons arrived, he would have nearly 200 human ships and perhaps 50 allied vessels. Still outnumbered more than 3 to 1, but much better odds than the first engagement. Send a message to all ships, he ordered. Standard Deathworlder doctrine applies. We're not here to capture territory or take prisoners. We're here to make sure the Vorthons understand that attacking peaceful species carries a price they can't afford to pay. On the surface of Zephyros Prime, Admiral Kethara was learning things about her rescuers that both amazed and terrified her. The humans had sent down supply ships to help with rescue operations, and the Zephyrian survivors got their first close look at actual Deathworlders. The humans were tall by Zephyrian standards, averaging 6 feet in height, with dense bone structure and powerful musculature. But it was not their physical appearance that disturbed Kethara. It was their behavior. They moved through the ruins of the capital city as if disaster zones were their natural habitat. The radiation levels that forced Zephyrians to wear protective suits barely seemed to affect them. They worked in the toxic smoke of burning buildings without breathing apparatus. When unstable structures collapsed around them, they simply shrugged off impacts that would have broken Zephyrian bones. They adapt, Dr. Elthera reported to Kethara. The elderly scientist had been studying the humans since they arrived. Their biology is remarkably resilient. Their blood chemistry changes to handle different toxins. Their bone density increases under stress. Their muscle fibers actually grow stronger when damaged and allowed to heal. That's impossible, Kethara said. Evolution doesn't work that way. It does on a world that's constantly trying to kill you. I've been analyzing the data from their homeworld, this Earth they speak of. Admiral, their planet is a nightmare. The gravity is twice what we consider normal. The weather includes storms that can level cities, temperatures that swing from boiling to freezing, and atmospheric disturbances that would tear our ships apart. The surface is constantly shifting due to geological activity, and that's before you consider the native life forms. What about them? Everything on their world is designed to kill and eat everything else. They evolved alongside creatures that could crush them, poison them, or tear them apart. They learned to be persistence hunters, chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They developed pack tactics to bring down creatures 10 times their size. They became tool users because they had to. Anything else would have died. Kethara felt a chill. No wonder they build ships like weapons platforms. Admiral, I've been analyzing their military doctrine. They don't fight wars the way civilized species do. They don't seek to capture territory or force surrender. They fight to completely destroy their enemy's ability to make war. When they say they're going to handle the Vorthon problem, they mean they're going to eliminate the Vorthon Empire entirely. Before Kethara could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the city. The Vorthon reinforcements had arrived. 800 Vorthon ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, spreading across the system like a dark cloud. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never met anything that could seriously threaten them. Admiral Rivera watched them come and opened a communication channel. Vorthon Fleet. This is Admiral Marcus Rivera of the Terran Defense Fleet. You have committed acts of genocide against peaceful species. Withdraw from this system immediately or face the consequences. The reply came from Emperor Vrakthus himself, broadcast across all frequencies so that every ship in the system could hear. Unknown species. You have interfered with Vorthon expansion. This system and all others in this region now belong to the Empire. Surrender your ships and prepare to be enslaved or be destroyed. Rivera's response was immediate and final. Negative. All ships, weapons free. Engage at will. Show them what happens when someone fights back. The second battle for Zephyros Prime began differently from the first. This time, the humans did not wait for the enemy to come to them. They accelerated toward the Vorthan fleet at maximum burn, their allied ships forming up alongside them. The Cathara ships looked like predatory fish, all flowing curves and hidden weapons. Their crews were pack hunters from a world of eternal storms, and they fought with the coordination of a pride of lions. The Grimlock vessels were massive, ugly things designed to crack apart asteroids, but their crews treated combat like competitive sport. Emperor Vrakthus watched the tactical display with growing disbelief. The enemy was not trying to outmaneuver his forces or find tactical advantages. They were simply charging straight at his battle line, outnumbered 4-1, as if they actually wanted to fight his entire fleet at once. "They're insane," he muttered. His tactical officer, a veteran of 50 conquest campaigns, shook his head slowly. "No, sire, I think there's something else. Something we've never encountered before." "What?" "A species that evolved to be apex predators. Look at their formation. They're not trying to preserve their forces or minimize casualties. They're trying to maximize damage to us even if it costs them ships." The first exchange of fire lit up space with the fury of a small star going nova. Vorthan energy weapons lashed out across the void, striking human ships that absorbed. Emperor Vrakthus stood in his throne room aboard the Conquest Eternal, staring at reports that made no sense. In 3 months, the humans and their allies had destroyed 7 major Vorthan fleets. Worse, they were not simply defending. They were hunting. "Explain this," he commanded, pointing at the tactical display. Red markers showed human fleet movements across Vorthan space. "How do they know where our ships are going to be?" General Morthak, now the sole surviving fleet commander, trembled as he spoke. "Sire, they fight unlike any species we have encountered. They do not wait for us to attack. They seek us out. Their scout ships appear in our systems, study our positions, and vanish before we can respond. Then their fleets arrive and attack our weakest points." "Our weakest points?" "We have no weak points." "With respect, sire, we do now. The humans have studied our tactics for months. They know exactly how we deploy our ships, how we supply our fleets, how we communicate. They strike our supply convoys, attack our isolated squadrons, and force our main fleets to divide their strength." The Emperor's massive fist slammed into the arm of his throne. "They are only one species. How can they be everywhere at once?" "They are not alone, sire. The intelligence reports indicate at least 6 different species fighting alongside them, and they are all unnatural." "Unnatural how?" General Morthak activated the holographic display. Images appeared showing various alien species engaged in combat with Vorthan forces. The Kithara appear to be pack hunters from a tidally locked world. Half their planet is frozen, half is boiling, and the strip between them is ravaged by perpetual storms. They hunt in coordinated groups and they never retreat, even when outnumbered. The display shifted to show silicon-based life forms tearing apart Vorthan ships with massive claws. The Grimlocks evolved on worlds with gravity 3 times galactic standard. Their bones are crystalline matrices harder than our best armor. They see combat as recreation. What about the others? The Vexhi come from gas giant atmospheres with crushing pressure and toxic chemistry. They pilot ships that move through enemy formations like liquid metal. The Korath are insectoid hive minds from radioactive worlds. They coordinate perfectly and have no concept of individual self-preservation. Emperor Vrakthus studied the images with growing dread. "They are all Deathworlders. All of them?" "Yes, sire. And there are more arriving every week. The humans appear to have formed some kind of alliance of killer species. They call themselves the Deathworld Compact." The Emperor turned away from the display. For 3 centuries, the Vorthan Empire had expanded by finding peaceful species and overwhelming them with superior numbers and brutality. It had worked because every other species they encountered had evolved on gentle worlds where cooperation and reason were rewarded. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked quietly. "Approximately 800, sire. But they are scattered across our territory trying to defend too many systems." "And the enemy?" "Conservative estimates suggest they have at least 300 ships actively hunting our forces. But their ships are more powerful than ours, their crews more experienced in actual combat, and their tactics are unpredictable." Admiral Rivera stood in the war room of Deathworld Compact headquarters, established in a hollowed-out asteroid in the Zephyros system. Around him, holographic displays showed the progress of the war across dozens of star systems. Each display was monitored by officers from different Deathworld species. "Report," Rivera ordered. Commander Chen highlighted a section of the tactical map. Task Force Alpha has eliminated the Vorthan garrison at Kolos Prime. Admiral Okonkwo reports minimal resistance. The enemy fleet retreated after losing half their ships. Task Force Beta? Rivera asked. A Kithara officer responded, her voice carrying the harmonics of a pack predator. Hunt Leader Sekthara reports success at Mordak Station. The prey scattered when we struck their supply depot. 17 ships destroyed, none escaped. A massive Grimlock, his crystalline hide scarred from countless battles, spoke next. Mining Fleet Talon has cracked the asteroid fortresses at Vex Prime. The soft shells tried to hide behind rocks. Amusing. Rivera nodded with satisfaction. The war was proceeding exactly according to plan. The Deathworld Compact did not fight like civilized species. They fought like a coordinated pack of apex predators. What about the Vorthan homeworld? He asked. Commander Chen brought up a detailed scan of the Vorthan home system. Heavy fortifications, orbital defense platforms, and the remains of their reserve fleet. Intelligence estimates 400 ships protecting the system, plus planetary defense systems. Tough nut to crack, Rivera mused. What do our allies think? The Kithara officer's eyes gleamed with predatory interest. Hunt Leader Velkara suggests a coordinated assault, multiple pack strikes to draw off their defenders, then a killing blow to their heart. The Grimlocks want to crack their planet like an asteroid. The massive alien added helpfully, but humans said no planet cracking. Still not sure why, Rivera smiled. The Grimlocks were excellent allies, but their solution to most problems involved mining charges and industrial explosives. Because we want to liberate the conquered populations, not exterminate them. A new voice spoke from the communication array. Rivera, this is Admiral Kithara. I'm receiving reports from across Vorthan space. Their conquered worlds are rising in rebellion. When word spread that someone was actually defeating Vorthan fleets, the slave populations began fighting back. Rivera nodded. This was the part of the plan that the Vorthans could never have understood. Deathworlders did not just fight wars. They inspired others to fight. How many worlds? He asked. 17 systems so far, Admiral. The Vorthans are having to divert ships to suppress the rebellions. Their defensive strength is being stretched thin. Perfect. Signal all task forces. Phase 2 begins now. We hit the homeworld while they're distracted. The assault on the Vorthan homeworld began with a light-speed barrage from extreme range. Human railgun platforms, positioned days earlier in the outer system, launched tungsten projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. The orbital defense stations never saw them coming. Emperor Vrakthus watched from his palace as flowers of destruction bloomed around his world. The humans had done something impossible. They had positioned heavy weapons in his own system without being detected. How? He demanded of his remaining advisors. The projectiles came from stealth platforms, sire. Our sensors cannot detect them. They appear to be coated with some kind of absorption material that makes them invisible to our scanners. The Emperor stared at the tactical display showing the destruction of his orbital defenses. They have been planning this for months. Yes, sire. While we were chasing their fleets, they were positioning weapons around our homeworld. The main assault began 6 hours later. Ships from 6 different Deathworld species translated out of hyperspace in perfect coordination. The human fleet drove straight at the remaining orbital platforms, absorbing enemy fire and returning it tenfold. The Kithara ships scattered into hunting packs, striking at Vorthan vessels that tried to flee. The Grimlock simply rammed through the defensive formations like living asteroids, but it was the coordination that truly terrified the Vorthan defenders. Each species fought differently, but they supported each other perfectly. When human ships needed covering fire, Kithara vessels appeared to provide it. When Grimlocks charged into enemy formations, human ships cleared their path with precision strikes. Emperor Vrakthus realized he was watching something that had never existed before in galactic history. An alliance of apex predators working together like a single massive pack. Order all ships to retreat to the inner system, he commanded. We will make our stand at the planet. Sire, if we retreat, the outer colonies will be defenseless. The outer colonies are already lost. The Emperor roared. Everything is lost. These Deathworlders do not fight to conquer. They fight to destroy. They will not stop until our empire is ashes. The final battle took place in orbit around the Vorthan homeworld itself. 400 Vorthan ships fought desperately against 300 Deathworld vessels. For 12 hours, space around the planet burned with weapons fire. The Vorthons fought with the desperation of cornered animals, but desperation was not enough against species that had evolved to hunt cornered animals. When the battle ended, the Vorthon Empire was finished. Emperor Vrakthus broadcast a message of surrender from his ruined palace, offering to negotiate terms. Admiral Rivera's response was broadcast to every ship in the system. There are no terms. Your empire is dissolved. Your fleets are destroyed. Your conquered worlds are free. Any Vorthon ships that continue to attack peaceful species will be hunted down and eliminated. This is not a negotiation. This is notification. On the surface of Zephyros Prime, Admiral Cathara watched the end of the war through her communication systems. The Vorthon Empire, which had terrorized peaceful species for 3 centuries, had been destroyed in less than 6 months. Admiral, her communications officer said quietly, "We're receiving messages from 47 star systems, former Vorthon colonies. They're all saying the same thing. What? Thank you." Cathara looked up at the stars where the Deathworlder fleets were already beginning. 1 year after the fall of the Vorthon Empire, Admiral Cathara stood in the rebuilt capital of Zephyros Prime, preparing for a meeting that would reshape galactic civilization. The Great Council Chamber had been reconstructed with a difference. Where once it had been designed for peaceful deliberation among similar species, it now had to accommodate beings from worlds that most civilized species still considered uninhabitable. The human embassy had been built first, a practical structure that looked more like a fortress than a diplomatic building. But then everything the humans built looked like a fortress. Admiral Rivera had explained that on Earth, buildings that could not withstand hurricanes, earthquakes, and other natural disasters simply did not survive long enough to serve their purpose. "Ambassador Rivera," Cathara greeted the human diplomat as he entered the chamber. "Thank you for coming." Marcus Rivera smiled, though Cathara was still learning to read human facial expressions. "Thank you for hosting this gathering, Admiral. I know it's not easy for your people to adjust to having Deathworlders as neighbors." "We are learning," Cathara admitted. "Your construction teams are efficient." That was one way to put it. The human reconstruction crews worked with a speed and disregard for personal safety that left Zephyrian observers stunned. They operated heavy machinery in conditions that would require evacuation for most species. When buildings collapsed around them, they simply dug themselves out and continued working. "Your people adapt quickly," Rivera observed. "Most species take decades to accept major changes in their worldview." Cathara considered this. The Zephyrians had indeed adapted faster than anyone expected. Perhaps it was because they had seen what happened to species that did not adapt. The Vorthon Empire had ruled through the assumption that all other species were weak and peaceful. The Deathworlders had proven that assumption fatally wrong. The council chamber began to fill with representatives from across the galaxy. The Alterans arrived first, their crystalline forms catching the light as they moved. Their homeworld was still healing from Vorthon occupation, but their songs of gratitude could be heard across 3 star systems. The gas-dwelling Luminous came next, their floating forms shimmering in the specially prepared atmosphere tanks. They had been among the first species to request protection under the new Galactic Defense Compact. Then came the Deathworlders. A delegation of Cathara entered like a coordinated hunting pack, their movements fluid and predatory even in peaceful surroundings. They took positions around the chamber that allowed them to watch all entrances simultaneously. The Grimlock representative was massive even by their species' standards, a crystalline giant who had to duck to fit through the reinforced doorway. His presence made the chamber feel smaller, like sharing space with a living mountain. Other Deathworld species followed. The Vexhi flowed into the room like liquid mercury given form. The Korath delegation moved as a single organism, their hive-mind coordination eerie to observe. Each species was obviously fundamentally different from the peaceful civilizations they had come to protect. "This gathering will come to order," Cathara announced. "We are here to formalize the Galactic Defense Compact, an alliance between peaceful species and the Deathworld Coalition for mutual protection and cooperation." She looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. 1 year ago, my people sent a desperate plea for help into the darkness of space. We expected no response. Instead, we discovered that the galaxy contained species unlike anything we had imagined. Species that had evolved to survive in conditions that would kill most of us within minutes. The human ambassador leaned forward. "With respect, Admiral, I think it's important that everyone understands what they're agreeing to. The Deathworld Coalition is not offering to be your military. We're offering to be your partners. That means peaceful species will need to accept some uncomfortable truths about the galaxy. Such as? Asked the Alteron delegate, her crystalline voice chiming like bells. Such as the fact that not every species is peaceful, Rivera replied. The Vorthons were not unique. There are other aggressive civilizations out there. Some of them are probably watching these proceedings right now, trying to decide if they want to test the new order. The Grimlock representative spoke, his voice like grinding stone. Let them come. Breaking things is fun. That's exactly the attitude that concerns some of our prospective partners, Rivera said with a slight smile. The Deathworld species fight wars differently than civilized societies. We don't capture territory or force surrender. We eliminate threats completely. Kithara felt the weight of that statement. She had seen human military doctrine in action. When they said they would eliminate a threat, they meant it literally. Is that necessary? Asked the luminous delegate, their translated voice carrying harmonics of distress. It was the Kithara hunt leader who answered. On our worlds, threats that are not eliminated completely return stronger. It is better to end problems permanently than to fight the same battles repeatedly. The chamber fell silent as the peaceful species contemplated this philosophy. For beings who had evolved on gentle worlds where cooperation was always rewarded, the Deathworlder approach to conflict was profoundly alien. However, Rivera continued, we are not suggesting that peaceful species adopt our methods. What we're proposing is a division of responsibilities. Peaceful species continue to do what they do best. Exploration, research, art, philosophy, trade. We handle the threats that diplomacy cannot resolve. A protection arrangement, the Altaran delegate said slowly. A partnership, Rivera corrected. We're not offering to be your guards. We're offering to be your allies. That means we learn from each other. Your people have technologies and insights that we need. Our people have experience with threats that you've never had to face. Kithara activated the main display, showing a star map of the galaxy. The proposal before us would create protected zones around peaceful species territories. Any aggressive action against member worlds would trigger a coordinated response from the Deathworld Coalition. What about aggressive actions against Deathworld territories? Asked the luminous delegate. The Grimlock representative made a sound that might have been laughter. No one is that stupid, Rivera nodded. Deathworld species can take care of themselves. But we've learned that there's value in having stable, peaceful neighbors. Your civilizations create things of beauty and wonder. Our civilizations create things that survive and endure. Together, we can build something that is both beautiful and eternal. The debate continued for hours. Some species worried about becoming dependent on Deathworlder protection. Others feared that association with such aggressive species would make them targets. A few questioned whether beings from Deathworlds could truly be trusted to protect rather than conquer. Finally, Kethara called for a recess. The various delegations withdrew to consider their positions. In the human embassy, Rivera met with his staff to review the negotiations. The peaceful species are scared, Commander Chen observed. They've spent their entire evolutionary history assuming that intelligence leads to cooperation. The idea that intelligence can also lead to more efficient ways of killing is hard for them to accept. Can you blame them? Rivera asked. Most of them had never seen warfare until the Vorthons arrived. They're being asked to ally with species that think about conflict the way they think about art or music. Do you think they'll agree to the compact? Rivera looked out the window at the Zephyrian city being rebuilt. Human construction teams worked alongside local crews, sharing techniques and technologies. Despite their differences, the two species were learning to work together. They'll agree, he said finally, because the alternative is waiting for the next Vorthon Empire to show up. And next time, they might not be lucky enough to have their distress call reach the quarantine zone. When the council reconvened, the vote was closer than Rivera had expected. But the Galactic Defense Compact was approved. 47 peaceful species agreed to the mutual defense arrangement. The Deathworld species pledged to protect them from aggressive civilizations. The signing ceremony was held at sunset on Zephyros Prime. As representatives from dozens of species formalized the agreement, Admiral Kethara reflected on how much had changed since that desperate day when they broadcast their plea for help. Admiral Rivera, she said as the ceremony concluded, may I ask you something? Of course. When you first received our distress call, why did you come? You didn't know us. You had no obligation to help. Rivera was quiet for a moment, looking up at the stars. On Earth, we have an old saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Your people were being slaughtered by bullies. We couldn't do nothing. Even though helping us put your own people at risk? Especially because of that, Rivera replied. Admiral, Deathworld species understand something that peaceful civilizations often don't. Safety is not the absence of danger. Safety is the presence of people willing to face danger to protect what matters. Cathara looked around at the mixed gathering of species. Humans worked alongside Zephyrians. Cathara hunters shared tables with Alteran artists. Grimlock warriors discussed philosophy with luminous scholars. It should have been impossible.